I will call forth now Marija Mitrović, who is Professor of Serbian and Croatian Literature here at the University of Trieste, and who will speak to us about how smuggling has been seen in literature. So I
Thank you.
beg you 20 minutes.
The title of my relation is Smuggling as a Literary Topic. As a kind of an introduction, I'll tell you a tale from the Middle East entitled The Smuggler. A clever smuggler came to the border with a donkey. The donkey's back was heavily laden with straw. The official at the border was suspicious and pulled apart the man's bundles till there was straw all around, but not valuable thing is in the straw was found. Now each day for 10 years, the man came to the border with a donkey. Although the official searched and searched the straw bundles on the donkey's back, he never could find anything valuable hidden in them. Many years later, after the official had retired, he happened to meet the same smuggler in the marketplace and said, "Please, tell me, I beg you, tell me, what were you smuggling? Tell me if you can." "Donkeys," said the man. A person who gets involved in an illegal business in carrying goods from the place to another when these two places are separated by a border must certainly be dexterous, quick, courageous. This time I would like to speak about so-called classic literature, the one which is included in the most restricted body of literary works that are recommended to young people during their education, the ones that form the so-called literary canon. The famous writer and the recipient of Nobel Prize, Rudyard Kipling, and the author of the popular Jungle book, wrote a brilliant poem, The Smuggler's Song, which you can find on internet in a series of different interpretations, composed as a ballad, recited by excellent actors, interpreted down in every detail. In one of the commentaries of the poem, I read the following. Smuggling started in England in approximately beginning of 14th century when Edward I placed a duty on exported wool. In the 1670s, 20,000 packs of wool were smuggled to Calais every year. That's a lot of wool. This went on until the beginning of the 18th century when the French customers could buy wool from Ireland at about the same price. And further on, many regions of England are extremely proud of their smuggling past, including Cornwall, East Yorkshire, and others. In fact, virtually anywhere that has a coast. There are indeed differences when it comes to goods which are smuggled, their quantity and amounts of money circulating in the process. But certain main principles remain in force. It is always a business that skirts the law. It is passed over in silence. It is important not to ask anything about when you see what is going on and how, to turn towards the wall and refuse to see what everybody else is aware of, but pretends not to see. Smuggling brings benefits to many, not just those who are directly involved in the business, but also to numerous mediators and even those who will camouflage and conceal the whole operation from the authorities. My attention would be considered on a few stories which were at the time included in all textbooks and school anthologies on the territory of former Yugoslavia. illegal transport of commodities, trading in goods for which no prescribed duties have been paid. I have chosen 3 stories. Martin Krpan, the hero of the story, Martin Krpan's Vrha, Slovenian classic author Fran Levstik. Then the second one, Štivrnikov France, the hero of Jurčić's story Tihotapec, Smuggler, from 1864. And the third one, 2 characters from the story entitled Vodene sile, Water Forces, from Serbian writer Simo Matavulj, born in Šibenik and living there then in Montenegro and Belgrade. Since I know that Martin Krpan, who transports English salt on his mare from Trieste to the interior of Slovenia, was already discussed at previous sessions of the gathering on smuggling, I would like to stress only one fact related to this story. It became extremely popular at the time of preparation for the winning of Slovenia's independence, and anthropologist Bojan Baskar pointed out how and why this story turned into true myth among Slovenians. In a whole series of interpretation of Levstik's story, commentators asked the following question: what was Krpan in fact trading in? What is the English salt? Baskar offers quite a few convincing reasons to believe that it was indeed kitchen salt, but he also stated opinions according to which Krpan was in fact smuggling potassium nitrate. Then that was transported from India and China by English ships, and that's why it obtained the epithet English salt. This powder is an important component of gunpowder, although it is, besides that, is being used in food industry and as fertilizer in agriculture. If we look upon Krpan as the smuggler of kitchen salt, we will consider him a man of the people who was helping his people to get hold of a product monopolized by the empire until 1918. But if we look upon him as a smuggler of an important component of gunpowder, we see him as a predecessor of one of nowadays important smuggling fields. He is involved in smuggling arms and not in helping the impoverished population get a basic necessary ingredient of everyday diet. The other 2 stories about smugglers, although they can be found in numerous anthologies, have not won such a degree of popularity or so many commentaries. Jurčić's longer story, Tihotapec, Smuggler, has the features of the so-called village stories, but also contains germs of a criminalistic novel. It follows the destiny of a young man called France Štivrnik from a poverty-stricken village on the border between Slovenia and Croatia. In order to make a few dinners, Štivrnik approaches tobacco smugglers who are bringing the goods from Croatia. One of the border officials falls in love with the smuggler's sister. Risking his own life, Štivrnik kills the border guard because he believes that an honorable village girl cannot marry such a broadly disliked man as the customs official is in the eyes of the entire region. In the eyes of a villager, the greatest enemy is the border guard. Local population gets along better with smugglers than border guards and protects the former. After all, villagers buy tobacco from these very smugglers. An exceptionally interesting figure is a smuggler can be found in the story written by Simo Matavulj in 1897, entitled Vodene sile, Water Forces. apart from the narrator, who is the same time one of the protagonists in this story, there is also Sepp, a young man who offers to a tourist who became the narrator of the story to drive him along the coast and show him the sights. The third character, named Lovrić, lives in a lonely house on a hedge above the sea, a ridge up which the curious tourist climbs and Sepp follows. Both the sight, the difficult-to-climb ridge, and the bizarre dialogue that goes on in front of the lonely house between Sepp and Lovrić are brimming with certain hints, indications, and unclarified relationship and encrypted language between these two, who know each other but pretend they doesn't. Few words they exchange provoke great curiosity in the tourist, and he realizes that Lovrić is not just an elderly fisherman who is unable to move about and is mending nets sitting down, but also something else that the tourist is unable to fathom. The dialogue between Sepp and Lovrić proceeds as if Lovrić were some sorcerer, superior being who not only predicts when a storm will come up at sea, but also advises young Sepp how to defend himself against water forces. This whole relationship between the two locals is resolved by the tourist only that evening in the inn, when he begins to ask around who these two men are in fact. He learns that Lovrić is the notorious leader of smuggling, possibly pretending that he is mad, but perhaps he is mad. Guests at the inn, who reveal to the tourist the true identity of the man with whom he spent the day, do not express any condemnation of the forbidden business. Even in the narrator tourist himself, there lingers as a predominant veil of secrecy, miraculousness, even magician's skills that he attributes to old Lovrić. There is neither condemnation nor suspicion about the men who are arranged in smuggling. As a constant that appears in all three stories is a naive, attractive presentation, like in a fairy tale of men who smuggled donkeys. Geographically speaking, two of these stories take place in littoral parts of the country, so it can be assumed that in the south of Europe, like in England, smuggling flourished in the vicinity of the sea routes. It seems, however, that not just openness of the sea routes was decisive, but also how severe were regulations imposed by a state on its citizens. The story by Josip Jurčić takes place in the region somewhere south of Zagreb, where the border between Croatia and Slovenia is nowadays. But if we recall that all these regions were parts of Habsburg monarchy at that time, we cannot but wonder which were these borders, what obstacles that commodities traveling within the same state come against. Obviously, the state collected taxes for goods not just at its entry, but also within the country where there are regions within which special customs regulated existed. The more regulations, the more offenses. From the time of Adam and Eve down to the present day, a man has always been fond of forbidden fruit, and it matured not a pin whether the goods were really better or worse, so that they were prohibited, men would risk their necks to get them. Perhaps this can explain the absence of this topic in classical Serbian and Bosnian literature, in the parts of former Yugoslavia which lived for a long time under the domination of Ottoman Empire. Less democratic, but also less organized. This society had different principles of collecting taxes, and inside the whole empire were no points where a traveler would have to pay dues for entering a new region. In this sense, Ottoman Empire operated like the European Union. Within its borders, commodities traveled freely. Now I cite confirmation of this state with one novel of Ivo Andrić, Put Alije Đerzeleza, that is about one Bosnian Muslim hero that was obliged to stop himself on the border between Austrian and Ottoman Empire, and he was together with other members of traveling, among other merchants, soldiers, priests, Jews, and Muslims. He finds himself in one Jumrukana, in one building of customs authorities, because they are waiting for some kind of temporary river crossing to be erected to continue their journey. A good opportunity for customs officials to check what kind of goods they were putting together. But no, there is no trace of customs officials, although everything is happening in the building which belongs to the customs authorities. In the comparison with the literature which nowadays deals with the topic of smuggling, the enormous difference between the goods which were smuggled in the 19th century and the ones illegally traded in today immediately catches attention. Today it is primarily narcotics, arms, but people have also become commodities, so especially women's bodies are subject of trade, but so are certain human body organs. Smuggling, described in literature in 19th century, nowadays seems equally naive and innocent as the Eastern fairy tale cited at the beginning. And just to conclude, the difference in the type of traded goods is enormous, so it is the literature which nowadays focuses on smuggling. Relying on an analysis of topics of the latest prose, I went through 10 books written in the new millennium, the central topic of which is modern smuggling. There is no trace of anything exotic or tame. The reader is faced with a description of plain crime linked with corruption of people in power, cruel conflicts among clans, between clans and authorities, unjust judiciary, smugglers who can bribe the authorities privileged in court, corruptible and corrupt authorities. All that creates an image of abundant presence of crime and corruption in modern society. The subject of trade is practically not even mentioned. Attention is completely directed towards the ways, the relationships between illegal trade and authorities, the involvement of authorities in illegal activities. There is almost no trace of good literature there. Thank you.